Hi listeners, editing note here. This podcast is long, so we have split it into two parts. This is part one.
Welcome to the Spa Girls podcast, the self-publishing podcast for authors. You're in the right place for the best writing, marketing, and publishing advice, plus interviews with industry experts and best-selling authors. I'm Cheryl Phipps.
I'm Shar Barrett.
I'm Wendy Vanna.
And I'm Trudy J. And this week we have Nicholas Erik with us. Say hi,
Hey,
Nick.
Nick.
Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Welcome
No
back,
worries.
we should
Yes,
say.
yes, welcome back to the spa. Hope you enjoy your time with us.
That's not
So,
creepy at all.
yeah.
No.
So Nicholas is going to talk to us about an email series that I what am I saying? That I read a bit earlier in the year, and I read it and I thought, this is amazing. This is a fantastic topic. We're going to get Nick on and talk about it. And actually, if you're not part of Nick's email list, I think you should go join up right away because he's a very thoughtful, thinkery person
Yeah.
who has
Is
a
that a
lot of
word, though?
insights
Yeah.
into
Yeah,
the
well,
publishing
right there.
industry. So stop back chatting me, you two.
Okay.
Anyway, so Nick, I'll read out your bio and then we'll get straight into talking about the inflection point for authors. So Nicholas Erik is an experienced indie science fiction author with more than 20 fiction books to his name. He's also a very savvy marketer who writes comprehensive guides for authors, such as the Ultimate Guide to Book Marketing and the Ultimate Guide to Author Productivity, as well as offering courses on how to sell more books, build your fan base, and be more productive. Last time we had him on the show was November 2021, and we talked about ads more there. So if you're interested in learning about ads, there have been a lot of changes recently. So maybe I'm not sure. Yeah, we'll find out today whether you should go back and listen to that older episode. Nick, do you think we should, or are there so many changes that you just need to listen to more updated stuff?
I haven't listened to that episode in a while. I was surprised that it's been 4 years since I've spoken with you.
Exactly.
But most of what I talk about is going to be principles based. So there's probably going to be a lot of things that apply
Yeah.
in the current environment,
Mhm.
particularly testing, which I usually tend to emphasize. And that's actually more helpful now than it was before. It's always been extremely helpful and a foundation of running ads, but now it's more important with Facebook Andromeda, which is what they've called their recent update, where something called creative diversity is very important, and just having essentially multiple creatives that you have running.
Mm.
And for those not familiar with ad lingo, creative is just another word for ad. So just having multiple ads running that appeal to different people helps Facebook's new AI-powered algorithms find the right people and helps you target a variety of people in that audience.
Okay, I'll stop you there. We're gonna first of all we're gonna talk about the inflection point because I'm fascinated by it, and then later on in the interview we'll definitely talk a bit. We'll dig a bit more into that the face changes to Facebook because I've been looking into that as well, and I'd love to get your take on those. But you talked about the inflection point, and for anyone who's never heard of that or doesn't know what you mean, what is an inflection point? So if we use an individual author's career, say. How does that work? What does that mean?
On an individual level, it's where you've built up your fan base, built up your backlist, and you have momentum. And essentially, it's where compound interest kind of starts taking over, and your progress goes suddenly from being incremental to exponential. And what that means is, if anyone's seen these graphs online, which are called hockey stick graphs, as the name suggests, it's where your progress hockey sticks upward, and all of a sudden you're going from like this type of thing, and maybe you had some actual downturns, and then you're building, and then boom. What people call overnight success is actually the product of a lot of different elements coming together, where you've tested a bunch of ads, you've sent newsletters consistently, you've released series and probably multiple series, and researched the market, found what worked, what didn't, what resonated with readers. And you've done all that repeatedly over years, and then you build momentum, and then that's where things can really accelerate. And usually that's on an individual level. Right now, I would say because of all the changes that are happening with AI, it's actually something where those opportunities are available to most authors. And what you need to do is just be able to adapt to those changes. And then you can potentially harness those really huge benefits of compound interest, which usually, again, are going to be on an individual basis. But because of just all the things happening technology wise, it's something that can be not just the product of all the effort that you put in. The outside macro forces are potentially helpful, or they can be potentially harmful if you kind of bury your head in the sand and don't adapt to the changes. And that doesn't mean using AI. It just means that because there are so many changes with AI, there's a lot of investment in software, technology, various products that we as solopreneurs or small business owners can use, and then we can deploy those in our own businesses and use them to grow faster. And one of the examples of that is just all the changes that have happened with Facebook, less talked about, but also happening. Amazon ads, there have been more releases in terms of features on Amazon ads over the past probably 3 months than there have been over probably the previous 3 years, I would say. Hasn't really gotten a whole lot of coverage in the indie community, but Amazon's doing the same thing, and it's all powered by this investment in AI. And also just the big corporations know that AI is huge, and they're looking at their products, whether that's an ad product, software product, and trying to add those features on. But also, as they're doing that, they're adding many things that aren't necessarily AI related, because they're trying to compete in this evolving marketplace, which benefits us as authors because it means we have more ways to reach readers. And for example, with Amazon, they're giving us access to more data than they previously did with the ads, and they gave a ton of data on the ads performance. So if you're a data person, that's great. If you're not, then that's something that you won't necessarily use, but it means more options ultimately, and you can choose what opportunities to pursue and which ones to ignore.
Yeah, that's right. Because would you say that AI is kind of seeping into everywhere now? Like you almost can't not use AI if you're a, is that fair or is that not fair? If you're online.
Certainly, if you're running any ads, there are AI powered features there that can't be turned off. They're just intrinsic to the ad platform. And then, if you have, say, a Gmail account or something, Gemini is turned on by default with the summary at the top. If you're using Google, then you're going to see the AI summary at the top there, first thing. And so I think you'd be hard pressed to find someone who hasn't experienced some level of AI involvement in their business. Whether you use tools like ChatGPT or Claude or other AI image generators or anything like that is another topic. But yeah, the software companies that design most of these products that we use, they are deploying AI in pretty much every major product that they have, because right now it is the most important thing, capital letters, in tech. Now, whether this particular version of AI, which are large language models, whether that ends up being the kind of defining AI type that is used 5 years from now, 10 years from now, I don't think that it probably will be, which is interesting given the amount of investment in it. And so some of these features that are being used currently that are touted as AI are not particularly useful for that reason because they're not really using a model that is suited toward that task. For example, you see a lot of data analysis type of AI software programs or features. A lot of those don't work very well because a large language model, as the name probably suggests, is not built for math. You can kind of get it in the ballpark, but there's already a better technology for managing that type of data, which is called a spreadsheet that's been around for 40 years. So you have to also pick and choose what is going to be the most useful application of AI. And AI is just another technology. It's just another software tool. And classifying it that way both demystifies it and also, I think, reduces the fear levels considerably because all that you're doing is you're outsourcing or automating something with AI. But there are lots of things that aren't going to be good fits for AI, but there may be a different software program or something else that's useful. And I think that that's overlooked in most of the hype where because people have more money coming into those things, they can build features that they wouldn't otherwise be able to build in their software. And they can also build software more cheaply with AI and cater it to a more niche market, which we are as indie authors. And that's beneficial where there are specific tools and things that were more difficult to develop because of the expense that now are available to us, or we can actually code them on our own, which again is another topic. But like you can get Claude or ChatGPT to make little pieces of code for you to potentially solve a problem in your business that isn't big enough to have a commercial piece of software available, but it is useful for you as an individual to get rid of some sort of administrative task that is onerous and is not something that you like doing. So I think as a solopreneur, it's really exciting. Just even if you don't use the AI at all, just the data that's available to us now, the features that are available, the rate of progress is, yes, it's fast, but it's also beneficial if you're testing different things and adapting to it. I think if you're just sitting on the sidelines waiting for everything to shake out, like for example with Facebook or Amazon, you're waiting for those changes to stop. I don't know that they're going to stop anytime soon. And then by that point, you're going to be so far behind that it feels like you're swimming against the current.
Yeah.
And we are using AI in our tools already, aren't we? Like our editing tools with ProWriting Aid and Grammarly, that they are surely AI based, aren't they?
I'm not familiar with either of those. For example, meaning I haven't used them, I've heard of them,
Mm.
but I can't speak to what the level of AI integration is in those. With Microsoft Word, for example, Copilot is built in. I don't find
Mhm.
Copilot to be particularly useful, so it's not something that I employ when I'm writing or
Mm.
using Word or anything like that. But you're going to see more and more of that just
Yeah.
baked into the software that we've used for, some of us 30, 40 years. Like Word has been around since the late 80s,
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah.
early 90s.
Mm.
One of the
It's,
things, yeah, sorry, Sha.
no, I was just going to say just to reinforce what we're saying, what we're not saying here is that you have to use the large language models to do your writing. It's kind of the world that we're in now. We're all brushing up against it, and you can't not in some way. So, for example, Photoshop, if any person or any designer is using Photoshop, AI is baked into Photoshop. It's like
Mm.
it just is. If you're the old days of where you would kind of circle something to remove it and then sort of manually remove it. Now it's so good at being able to read, it's that kind of thing. Read the
Mm,
image.
Mm.
yeah. So Nick, you talked about the new features that are kind of coming out on the platforms and things that we're even as a niche market able to take advantage of through the money and the investment and things that are coming into AI, and that they're more off the shelf maybe solutions. And you also mentioned that increased productivity between 10 and 30% in a year. So where would you be getting that increased productivity? Is it just like how do you?
I would say that you would start with menial tasks. So this is specifically if you're using AI tools like ChatGPT, Claude. There are tons of other tools that
Mhm.
you can use. I'd say that those are the main ones, and that's where I would start if you're dipping your toe in the water or if your time is limited, because those will likely be around in a few years. And if they're not, then something similar is going to be around. So, for example, right now, as we record this, Gemini, whatever new release of Gemini, that on the AI leaderboards, that is apparently the most powerful model. And then next week, something else will be released, and maybe that will be knocked off from the top spot. But we can be reasonably certain that Google is going to be around in 3 years. So
Yeah.
if you're using something like ChatGPT, which is OpenAI's product, um, Claude, which is Anthropic's product, or Google Gemini, then something similar is going to be out there. There's also a bunch of open source ones that are from a variety of companies. So large language models are here to stay. You don't necessarily need to use them, but that's what I would focus on because it's a good fit for what we do. We work in words, and those are literally designed to generate words, analyze words, and just handle text. So focusing on that is going to give you the best short-term ROI as well as long-term ROI, where if you learn to use those well from a fundamental level, then you're not going to have to reskill in 3 years or 5 years. There's going to be new features, new tactics, and stuff like that. But if you learn those foundational elements well, then you'll be able to apply them 3 years down the line, which is always nice, where you don't have to constantly relearn everything. So that's where that 10 to 30% comes from, using those for things like, for example, creating a series Bible, where you give it the chapter that you just wrote, and then you have it summarize with a prompt, which is just the message that you gave AI. Hey, can you tell me what characters were in this chapter? What was the plot in this chapter? 50 words, 100 words. By the way, it's not very good at summarizing in a specific word count, which is kind of funny given that it's a large language model, but it's not very good
Yeah.
at counting. So 50 to 100 words, it might give you 60 words or 120 words, but it'll give you a brief summary. And then that's a way to summarize that chapter. And it may be a way to implement that in your business where before, I think most people would agree that having a summary of the book and that series Bible is really valuable. I would say that the number of people who do it consistently is a far lower number, myself included, where I have some series that have those, and then other series where you get 5, 6 books in, and you're like, I don't know what happened. I have to reread every single book. So that's where that could easily be by itself just a 10 to 30% gain, where you don't have to reread 6 books, which is going to take you 40 hours. And you
Mhm.
have that, which wasn't getting done before because it's not the most fun task. But with AI, you can get it to summarize things, and then you review it and correct any mistakes it makes. It can make mistakes, so don't take anything that it spits out as wholesale. Just use it immediately. You want to proofread it and make sure that the details are correct. It doesn't tend to have any typos. I don't think I've ever seen it generate something with typos in it. I'm sure that it can do that as well, but it's more about the details where it may say, okay, this character, went to this cafe and fought with this other character. And you're like, that's not quite right. They didn't really fight. And, they actually went someplace else and they were outside the cafe. It's
Mm.
gotten much better at getting those details correct. But if you're using it for the series Bible, if you're using it for ad copy, for TikTok scripts, for video ad scripts, for blurbs, whatever, you want to make sure that you're actually reading the output and double checking it, because the details aren't necessarily going to be correct. But that's where you get that 10 to 30% type of boost where it saves you from certain administrative tasks or certain things that aren't getting done consistently and just allows you to execute them more consistently. I mentioned ad copy, video scripts. It's not going to necessarily beat a human that is really good at doing those and writing those, but most people aren't very good at writing ad copy, so it's a win there, and that
Yeah.
can be a boost to your ads. It's also something where people don't tend to test enough options, and this is important, as I mentioned earlier, with say Facebook Andromeda having different options that appeal to different readers. It's a good way to get outside of your own head and come up with different angles, which is a different way to position the book.
Mm.
And you may be really focused on one aspect of the book, and that may appeal to a certain subset of readers. But by using AI, you can immediately generate 5, 10, 15 different ideas with the click of a button. And before that was very cognitively expensive and is something that also from a time perspective might take you 30 minutes or an hour. But I think more importantly, it just wasn't enjoyable for most people, where you have that tension in your head, your shoulders, wherever that kind of crops up, stress, anxiety about it. Here, that's all alleviated because you just say, hey, here's a summary of my book. Write me 5, 10 pieces of ad copy and focus on the relationship between the main character and the dog. And then you can have a different one where it's focused on the main character and the antagonist, right? And those are two very different ways of positioning the book. So it allows you to come up with a lot of different ideas really quickly, discard them, identify ones that are potentially promising. And then again, you don't have to use them as is. It's good enough at this point where you can often use blurbs, ad copy, scripts just right off the shelf where you don't really have to do any editing, but you can tweak it for language, for flow, for the style, tone, any of those. You can also have a conversation with the AI about those things. You can incorporate it into the original prompt where you say, hey, have a lighthearted tone or have a very dark, serious tone. Those are going to give you vastly different outputs. And I think as a creative tool, whether you're using it as a marketing tool or if you want to use it for writing to come up with ideas or anything like that, it allows you to really test things very quickly where you can see, for example, with the ad copy that, okay, this particular tone is a good fit for my book. And then you have it write something that's darker and you're like, whoa, okay, I was expecting that to be a better fit, but it actually wasn't. And again, you could do this before and you can still do this. The difference is one, the speed, but two, I think just the mental effort where it takes very little mental effort besides designing that initial prompt. But that prompt becomes an asset that you can use to repeatedly get similar results. And that's another thing where you can get a certain level of consistency. Now, AI has differences in the output, which is good, but a lot of the output is going to be more consistent than a person doing it, where maybe for book A, you follow a blurb formula that worked really well, and then book B comes out 3 months later or 6 months later, and then the blurb is different and you don't realize it, where you're not following any sort of formula or structure. And then you review it a year later because you're wondering why book B didn't do as well. And you're like, oh, okay, the blurb here doesn't really have any sort of framework. So it's useful if you have a framework, you can give it to AI. And that leads me to another thing where it's also really useful as a learning tool where it can walk you through certain things. So for example, if there's a transcript of this podcast, you could say, okay, sum up the notes. That's one thing, but you could also have it give you a step-by-step guide, or it could walk you through certain things in terms of, okay, what should I do first? What did Nick say to do with the 10 to 30%? And then it could give you that step-by-step, but it could also give you kind of an action guide where you're interacting with it and having a conversation with it. How do I apply this? you can ask it questions and it becomes much more interactive. So there are a lot of books, for example, that have lists of questions. I'm sure we've all encountered those where it's like a list of 20 questions and you're like, oh, that'd be great to answer those and fill those out when I have time and feel like it, which is never, right?
Yeah.
Now
Yeah.
you can give those frameworks to AI and have it walk you through those questions. And what's also cool is the AI, if you have memories turned on in either ChatGPT or Claude, it gets to know you better over time and learns your preferences, your strengths, your weaknesses, how you like to work. And then it can give you feedback based on the questions that you fill out. So it has a wide variety of use cases. That was kind of the 30,000-foot view, and there are plenty of others. But I would say the biggest one by far is don't use it to replace things that you like to do. I think that that is going to be a negative, both from a quality standpoint as well as just a quality of life standpoint.
Yeah.
That's not the purpose. The purpose is to smooth out some friction points that get in the way of doing those things that you actually enjoy in your author business, or just sticking points where it's like, oh, if I could do these couple things more consistently, if I could test ads more consistently, that would help me. If I had a series Bible to refer to, that would help me write this book. Again, it's not going to be necessarily double the speed, but realistically, that would be a 10% potential improvement, 20%, 30% in terms of, I think both the time spent where it reduces the time spent looking for details, as well as the quality where more of your mental resources are now devoted toward, okay, how do I make this character arc better? How do I improve the plot rather than, okay, what pants was the character wearing in the previous chapter, right? And like
Yeah.
spending half an hour trying to figure that out. So
Yeah.
ultimately, it's about quality and improving that. And again, you don't have to use that in terms of the AI tools, but if you do, it's not necessarily about writing and using it to write things. It's more about how can I use it to enhance
Yeah.
what I'm already doing and make the writing better.
Yeah. A lot of people are obviously nervous about putting their hard fought for copy into any of these programs, right? And they are worried about it being stolen or being used for other things. But there are ways that we can go around, so I've heard, of protecting that, isn't there? We can actually tell these AI programs that they're not to use it anywhere else or to save it or anything. Is that right?
Yeah, so all you have to do is go to the settings on Claude or ChatGPT, and I haven't used Gemini, but it probably has a similar setting. And just there's a setting that's going to be don't train the model based on what I,
Mhm.
enter. And then it's not going to train the model based on the manuscript that you upload or whatever other details you provide. In terms of these AI crawlers scraping your content, say from your website, there's a piece of text that you can add to some file on your website that the crawler will read. And if that's present, then it will not scrape the website. Now, you're dependent on the crawler actually following that guideline,
Mhm.
whether it does or not. Who knows? And I'm sure certain companies, crawlers, say that they do, and then they don't, but you don't
Yeah.
know that.
Yeah.
So I think once something is out there on the web, then it's something that you should just consider fair game for the model to
Yeah.
train on, whether
Yeah.
you think it's fair or not. Like, I'm not here to say whether that is fair or not. I'm just saying the reality is
Yeah.
that
Mm.
it's probably going to be used to train some sort of AI model. The other thing is that you can't stop someone from, say, with the newsletter. Say I had something in the bottom of the newsletter that said, don't use this with AI, etc. I can't stop anybody from copying and pasting
No.
Mhm.
that into the, you know, interface of ChatGPT or Claude to get feedback on their career or anything like that. And then maybe they have training enabled and now it's part of
Mm.
the potential training data set.
Mm.
And that's just the reality of the situation. By the way, you want to use the newsletters to experiment with AI, then go for it. I would say that that's a good starting point for the frameworks that I talked about, where because of the way that I write, where a lot of the frameworks are step by step and very structured, the AI can follow that very well. So if you have some sort of resource that you're trying to get feedback on, apply to your career, or just explore that idea in terms of the learning, then my content is a good fit for that. I'm not saying necessarily that the content is a good fit for whatever you're trying to do with your career, whether you like what I do or not.
Mm.
Some people do, some people don't, obviously, but it, even if you don't really resonate with the message behind it, a lot of the structural aspects are useful for just exploring that idea because it is very structured. So,
Awesome.
So how
obviously
does
feel free
it
to do that.
so you would put the say the text of your newsletter into say ChatGPT and say read this and find a way for me to apply it in my own
Mhm.
career or something like that. Is that kind of what you mean? Or
Yeah, and you can get it to walk you through it. Say it's a step-by-step framework where it's literally one, two, three, four. You could get it to walk you through that. There are some newsletters that I've had where there's a series of questions, which are really useful for using with AI because, again, no one's going to really sit down and take 20 minutes to answer question one, question two, question three. At best, you get a surge of adrenaline and motivation, and you get to the end of question one and you see 20 more, and you're like, this
Mm.
is, you know, my initial ambition has outstripped my willingness to do this. But here's what's cool about the AI is that these have apps, right? So that means that you can talk with them, literally talk with them. And what you'll find, even as a writer, is that most likely the cognitive load of speaking with someone, even if it's just a computer, and answering that question aloud is going to be much lower than organizing your thoughts into a very distilled format in terms of the writing. For example, with the podcast, it's easier for me to talk about this, even though I'm writing a lot, than writing the newsletters.
Mm.
Yeah.
It's just a lot more effort. And part of that's practice, where even if you're a writer, you're probably going to have spoken more in your lifetime than you will have written. But also, there's this factor where you don't have to be as clear with the spoken word, especially when you're talking with AI, where you don't have to get to the point where you can kind of circle around it and be like, oh, it's like that other thing and that thing that happened here. And you can be really vague and then
Yeah.
circle around the point for 3 minutes and it doesn't get upset. It's just transcribing what you're talking about. And then it can drill down to the heart of the matter and summarize it. And it does that really well. So you can have this very circuitous route to the answer that you're looking for. And you can also speak it out. So there's this element where you may not know what you're looking for.
Mm.
And writing is useful for figuring that out. That's a big reason why I write the newsletters. But that is time consuming. Some of those newsletters, they may take me 3, 4, 5 hours. Some of them may take me longer than that over multiple days. Some of them are shorter, thankfully. But with the AI, you can often get that answer of what exactly am I trying to say in
Yeah.
a minute or two, because it sums it up and you're like, oh, okay, that was what I was trying to say. Or you just say enough words that you actually get to the point that you were trying to make and you realize it. But because the cost is so low from both a time perspective and a risk perspective, where you're just talking to a computer, you can talk these answers out in a way that you might not do it with a human, where you might be reticent to kind of
Yeah.
appear like dumb, for lack of a better word, where you're like, this is kind of, uh, these aren't great thoughts. the AI doesn't care, and then it can kind of crystallize what you're thinking about. And it also
Yeah.
has more context than almost anybody that you know, because as you talk with it more, it learns more about you. And then it says, okay, hey, we've talked about this other thing, and this is a common thread throughout what we've discussed in previous chats. And it can use that to get to the heart of what you're actually saying. So I think for me, getting back to the original question of 10 to 30%, I think that the biggest ones are applying frameworks and going through those types of things where you have a system or a process or a list of questions that would be useful to answer or go through, but it's just difficult to find the time to do that. Having that in the, with the AI, giving that to the AI and having it walk you through that is really valuable. Automating tasks that or semi-automating tasks like creating a series Bible that can be sticking points or just testing more ad copy, things like that, generating more ad copy. I think that those are the most valuable ones. And then
Yeah.
the last one that I'll touch on is just creating little pieces of code or software apps or spreadsheet formulas to solve common recurring problems. So you can get AI now to create, for example, small Google app scripts, which are just essentially little programs that run within the Google ecosystem. And those can potentially automate things where there's no software app that's going to ever be available for it, but it solves a specific problem. And so an example is that you can get the Google App Script to extract data from a report. And there's never going to be a specific piece of software to do that for you. But now you can get the AI, you can describe what you want. And even without any coding knowledge, it can do that. The benefit over outsourcing is that you can troubleshoot it. Where when you outsource something, what people never mention is that it breaks, especially with code. At some point, something updates, and then the automation that has saved you hours in your business no longer works.
Yeah.
So if you're automating things, then that becomes a problem. What's cool about the AI is that you can say, hey, this broke. Here's the new documentation, and it can update it accordingly. And you can go back and forth with it. Sometimes it can do it in one shot. Sometimes it takes a little bit of discussion, but it really opens up a lot of opportunities to just smooth out some otherwise unpleasant or boring admin tasks that you just have to do as a business owner. And so those are the main things. I would say that getting it to write the books is honestly one of the worst use cases. You can do that, but you're going to get a better result if you can actually write a good fiction novel or nonfiction by doing it yourself. So having it take care of some of the cognitive draining tasks is really useful because then you can channel that more toward what is the highest leverage point, which is writing quality books or quality newsletter or whatever you're putting together. But I don't think that getting these programs to write huge sections of your book is going to be beneficial long term. And I know that people are doing that, and that's totally fine if you want to do that. I don't have an opinion on that one way or another. Do whatever you want to do. But I don't think that it's necessarily the problem that people think that it is, where people are really worried about that. I don't think that the quality at this point is good enough to be all that concerned about. And I just don't spend my time really worried about things also that are out of my control. If other people are doing that,
Yeah.
then that's fine. But I don't think it's going to probably benefit them long term. And yeah.
We'll be back with Nick in part 2 of this interview. Make sure to subscribe to Spa Girls podcast wherever you listen or watch us, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks. Bye bye.